Supermarine Spitfire is an iconic British fighter that saw extensive service with Britain, her allies, and other nations before, during, and after the Second World War. Regarded as possibly the best family of props in War Thunder, in this video we'll be taking a look at all 30 variants in-game. I've divided them up into 14 sections of either similar or identical Spitfires, and after looking at the early development, we'll go into the history and then the in-game performance of each group, going over what they are, and, more importantly, how to play them. In the wake of a failed bid for a 1931 specification set by the Air Ministry for a modern fighter being defeated by the Gloster Gladiator biplane, R.J. Mitchell of Supermarine embarked on a series of new designs. This eventually led to the Type 300, which was then refined with an enclosed cockpit, thinner wings, and the brand new Rolls-Royce PV-12 V12 engine, later named the Merlin. At the end of 1934, a £10,000 contract was issued by the Air Ministry for the construction of the improved Type 300 design. A new specification for an aircraft with less fuel, no bombs, and 8 303 Brownings was issued, and on the 5th of March 1936, prototype K5054 took flight from Eastleigh Airdrome, 4 months after the Hawker Hurricane. It was deemed a very capable aircraft, but not perfect. The rudder was too sensitive and it was barely faster than the Hurricane. Regardless, the RAF was happy and, with some minor changes, an order for 310 was placed in June. A number of names were considered, including the Shrew, but the Spitfire, referring to a fiery and ferocious woman, was selected, with the chief designer saying it was just the sort of bloody silly name they would choose. The public first saw the Spitfire at a display in late June 1936, but full-scale production was delayed as it ran into problems with Supermarine being busy with flying boats and Vickers being busy with the Wellington. This meant that the first production Spitfire didn't come off the line until mid-1938, 2 years after the order was placed. The Spitfire's design was, in a way, defined by its elliptical wings. These were selected to solve a problem. The wings had to be thin to avoid creating drag, but thick enough to house the weapons, ammunition, and landing gear. The elliptical wing was the most efficient shape for an untwisted wing, leading to the lowest drag. The wings also had an innovative feature, detachable wingtips. These meant that a Spitfire could be configured for better low, medium, or high altitude combat with either clipped, rounded, or pointed wingtips. The airframe itself was a product of Britain's perception of the upcoming war. With France as an ally, German bombers would have to fly out over the North Sea, with their fighters not having enough range to escort them. Consequently, they imagined that there wouldn't be any enemy fighters, so the Spitfire was designed to quickly climb to intercept bombers. Despite this, the Spitfire's airframe was still an extremely capable dogfighter, which would prove invaluable when the war broke out.
But General Weygand called the Battle of France is over. I expect that the Battle of Britain is about to begin. Upon this battle depends the survival of Christian civilization. Upon it depends our own British life and the long continuity of our institutions and our empire. The whole fury and might of the enemy must very soon be turned on us. Hitler knows that he will have to break us in this island or lose the war. If we can stand up to him, all Europe may be free, and the life of the world may move forward into broad, sunlit uplands. But if we fail, then the whole world, including the United States, including all that we have known and cared for, will sink into the abyss of a new dark age, made more sinister and perhaps more protracted by the lights of perverted science. Let us, therefore, brace ourselves to our duty. So bear ourselves that if the British Empire and its Commonwealth last for 1,000 years, men will still say, this was their finest hour.
In 1940, the first Spitfires were retroactively designated the Mark 1A after a failed attempt to arm some of them with the unreliable Hispano 20mm cannon was designated the Mark 1B. The Mark 1A first saw action right at the start of the Phoney War, where they scored their first kills against a pair of Hawker Hurricanes. Their first kills on enemies were on a small number of Ju-88s that tried to attack two British light cruisers a month later. In the summer of 1939, a new version of the Spitfire, the Mark II, was developed. The main change was the Merlin 12 engine, upgraded from the Merlin 3, with the Mark IIA retaining the same armament of 8 7.7mm guns, as well as a Mark IIB, which we'll cover shortly. This quickly replaced the Mark Is in service, which were sent to operational training units. The Mark I, as well as a number of Mark IIs, saw extensive use during the Battle of Britain and quickly became the most iconic plane of the Royal Air Force. Despite being used in smaller numbers than the Hurricane, the Spitfire generally had greater success with higher kill and survival rates. As part of a fundraising method to construct more Spitfires, the RAF had the Spitfire Fund, a scheme where communities could fund Spitfires with inscriptions on them. One such Mark IIA was named Venture 1 and is available in War Thunder as a premium, being identical to its tech tree counterpart. In War Thunder, the Spitfire Mark 1A and the Spitfire Mark 2A play almost identically, so I'll cover them as one. Both the Mark 1A and the Mark 2A are at 3.0 in air realistic battles, and are excellent as they can both climb and turn against most things they fight. At the start of the battle, you'll want to climb around 210 km an hour, avoiding using WEP as your engine is very prone to overheating. If you find your engine getting too hot, pull back a bit on the throttle as you'll want to have a bit of a temperature safety net for engagements. By doing this, you can often end up being able to intercept bombers in head-ons, which you can take advantage of, although if you fail to kill, avoid turning around to chase them as most of them will get you with their rear gunners. There isn't really a set altitude at which you should stop climbing, but rather pay attention to your surroundings. You don't want to get dived on if you're going slow, so if you notice something outclimbing you that wants you dead, try to build up some speed to dodge. Assuming you haven't been jumped, your next course of action should be working your way down the enemy fighters like a ladder. You can dive really well with the rip speed of 760 km an hour, although you shouldn't need to go quite that fast. Target the next highest fighter and use your energy advantage to dive on them, although pull away if they're going for a head-on. Your weaker, wing-mounted guns will often get you killed, especially if you're facing anything with nose-mounted cannons. When it comes to your weapons, they're very effective close in, at around 400 meters. As your exceptional turning performance allows you to pull lead very well, you can comfortably sit on the 6 of most enemies and shred them with few exceptions. If someone does try to energy fight you, be careful as you don't keep your energy as well as most energy fighters, especially once you turn. While you can stay in a turn very well, if you run out of energy you'll be a very easy kill. Realistically, most of your fights will be turn fights, which is where the Spitfire is strongest. You're able to outturn almost anything that isn't a biplane or Japanese, but those you can obliterate in energy fights. Another set of enemies to be mindful of are BF-109s. These can energy fight quite well and can prove a challenge if flown right. As a word of warning, don't use your flaps unless you know what you're doing. They have an incredibly low rip speed and take a very long time to deploy and retract. When spading the Mark 1A and Mark 2A, focus on getting engine upgrades, followed by airframe upgrades, and then finishing off with your guns. If you'd like to use these in ground RB, you're restricted to air-to-air combat as you have no suspended ordnance, and your 303s are useless against ground targets. The Spitfire Mark IIB is, essentially, a Mark IIA armed with 2 Hispano Mark I 20mm cannons and 4 7.7s, instead of the 8 7.7s found on the Mark IIA. This came about after the Battle of Britain showed that RAF fighters needed stronger armaments and represented a significant increase in firepower, although came with a set of drawbacks. The first Hispanos were notoriously unreliable, with a tendency to jam during maneuvers. These were later replaced with the Hispano Mark II, which fixed many of the jamming issues and was even adopted by the US as the AN-M2 without the new anti-jamming measures, leading to those same issues. In War Thunder, the Mark IIB has essentially the same flight model as the 2A, with the only differences being the armament and the BR, sitting at 3.7 in Air RB. This means you'll be facing significantly more competent foes, so you'll no longer be the top dog at altitude. Despite this, the playstyle is still much the same, just with a lot more care. Now, onto the Hispanos. These love to jam, so you'll have to be very careful with not holding down the trigger for too long. While you can still spray with your 7.7s, you have to choose carefully when to shoot your Hispanos. Additionally, at the time of this video, Hispanos are broken. Likely as a remnant of the cannon bug when the Leviathans update came out, Hispanos are extremely buggy when it comes to their hit rate, and will often spark or simply not register a hit despite it visually connecting. This can lead to extremely frustrating gameplay and persist through the Mark 1, Mark 2, and Mark 5 variants. As infuriating as this was to put up with when spading every single Spitfire for this video, it has been bug reported and accepted by the devs, along with another bug about Hispano HE shells missing about half their explosive mass. This isn't exactly a rare thing for Hispanos, as they seem to be the most bipolar gun in game, varying from patch to patch as either an amazing cannon with good ballistics, fire rate and damage, or having those great features be essentially nullified by whatever bug is floating around. Regardless, because these are bugs and will hopefully soon be fixed, I'll avoid bringing it up, although you're likely to continue to see it in the background clips. Another mildly frustrating quirk of Hispanos, specifically the Mark IIs that will grace every other Spitfire from here onwards, excluding the last two Seafires, are their state when stock. They have the worst stock performance of any cannon in game relative to their spaded state, with a third upgrade representing a 300% upgrade to the amount of time they can fire before they jam. And yes, you heard that right, third upgrade. Unlike every other cannon in game, Mark II Hispanos have not one, not two, but three modifications to bring them up to 100%, these being the normal new 20mm cannons, as well as year 1942 and year 1943 upgrades. As for what belts to run with Hispanos, it can vary, but generally running Universal appears to be the strongest right now, although previously it had been ground targets, so take all of that with a pinch of salt. Anyway, with that rant over, when spading the Mark IIB, focus on grabbing the engine upgrades before going for the airframe upgrades. Make sure to grab the 20mm belts too, as default Hispano belts leave much to be desired. Towards the end of 1940, the RAF predicted that Germany's new series of bombers, the Ju-86P, with its pressurized cabin, would herald the start of a sustained high-altitude bombing campaign. To combat this, the Spitfire Mark I airframe was fitted with a new Merlin 45 series engine. This delivered increased power and included a new supercharger. It also included improvements to the carburetor, which allowed it to pull negative Gs without fuel flow problems. This was to be known as the Mark V and was made in three main variants with a few sub-variants. The first variant was the Mark V-A, which had the same armament as the early Mark I, being 8 303 machine guns, and was notably flown by famous double amputee flying ace Douglas Bader. The second, and most common produced variant, was the Mark V-B, which featured the B-type wings with 2 Hispanos and 4 303s. It also featured a new oil cooler and could even be fitted with drop tanks. A tropical sub-variant, the 5B Trop, was also developed, featuring a large air filter under the nose for desert operations, providing a small hit on performance but allowing it to operate in the deserts of the North Africa campaign. In War Thunder, the 5B and the 5B Trop are both represented at 4.0 and 3.7 respectively. These play much like a direct upgrade to the earlier Mark IIB, having the same armament but superior performance. You'll really feel an increase in engine power, allowing you to climb better and retain your energy better. You'll also feel that better oil cooler, being able to run your engine without overheating, and even being able to sit on WEP for a bit. The only difference between the two, aside from their BR, is the air filter, which will slightly slow down a 5B Trop, although your performance will still supersede the Mark IIB, which sits at the same BR. The Mark V-B Trop can also be found in the Italian tree as a Rank 3 premium available for 1300 GE. As it's better in most aspects than the Italian aircraft at that BR, if you're in the market for a Rank 3 Italian air premium, it's a pretty good pick, being the cheapest and arguably the best at that rank. The Italians actually came to use the Spitfire from 1944 after Allied Command decided to arm the co-belligerent forces with British and American aircraft. One such aircraft was the Spitfire Mark V-B Trop, which saw action in the Balkans. Later on, between 1946 and 48, these were replaced by Mark IXs. As is the case with the previous Spitfires, none of the Mark V-Bs can carry suspended ordnance for CAS. When spading these planes, you'll want to focus on getting the 20mm belts and upgrades to your 20mm cannons, before going for engine mods and then airframe mods. The Mark 5C was a further upgrade from the 5B, featuring a strengthened fuselage and the improved 45M series Merlin engine, offering it increased performance. It also featured the Type C Universal wing, which had bulges to accommodate the feed mechanisms for two 20mm Hispano cannons on each side. Much like the earlier 5B, the 5C was produced in both normal and tropical variants, with the 5C Trop having that large dust filter underneath the engine, hampering performance but allowing it to operate in the desert. In War Thunder, the 5C sits at 5.0, whilst the 5C Trop is at 4.7. Much as is the case with the 5B Trop, the 5C Trop has worse performance due to the extra weight and drag. Being at this BR will put you against harder enemies, which is to a degree remedied by your improved engine, putting out over 100 extra horsepower. That being said, especially in up tiers, you'll start to face more dangerous foes, which you'll have to be careful of. This is partially remedied by your new armament, consisting of 4 Hispano Mark IIs. These have 120 rounds per gun instead of the previous 60, allowing you significantly more trigger time. Overall, for both the 5C and 5C Trop, I'd recommend following the exact same playstyle as the previous 5Bs, with one major exception. Whether due to a bug or an intentional feature representing the strengthened fuselage, both the 5C and the 5C Trop, but not any other Spitfire, have nigh unbreakable flaps. Despite this overspeed warning for them showing at the same speed as all of the other Spitfires, deploying them at any speed, at least any speed I was able to test them at, won't actually break them. Despite this, they still work and provide an exceptional amount of both lift and drag, effectively acting as a makeshift Cobra button. This rather arcane knowledge can give you the edge in some fights where you need to turn quickly, especially against other Spitfires, but can also be a trap as having your flaps out will slow you down very quickly. Another thing I'd note is whilst your performance excels that of the 5Bs, you'll find yourself very often outclimbed and out-engined by other, more dedicated fighters. Especially in up tiers, it can be worth trying to go for low altitude enemies, even if just to avoid being picked off early in the match when you're out of energy. In early 1942, the introduction of the Focke-Wulf 190 put pressure on Supermarine to get production started on a new Spitfire model equipped with the new 2-stage supercharged Merlin 61 engine. The performance of this engine in tests was described as a quantum leap over the Mark 5B, and to counter the 190, many Mark 5Cs were modified to take this new engine, resulting in the first Spitfire F Mark 9s. These can be recognized as modified Mark 5Cs instead of production Mark 9s by the larger bulges in the wings, and can be found in-game as the event premium Spitfire F Mark 9C, which is, unfortunately, the only Spitfire that I don't own, as I didn't see it fit to spend $100 on one. The main strength of the Mark 9 was its performance at altitude. Despite not sacrificing any ability to dogfight at lower altitudes, being as good as a Mark 5 below 30,000 feet, the Mark 9 was able to excel above that, being able to maneuver well for fighting up to 40,000 feet, as well as being able to get to those high altitudes better. The Mark 9 was also the first type to find itself equipped with a bomb rack, aside from some earlier field modifications, and would find itself used as a fighter bomber towards the end of the war. In-game, the F Mark 9 can be found at 4.3. While the rare F Mark 9C is 4.7, it has effectively the same playstyle, the only notable differences being the armament, 4 Hispanos, and the slight BR increase, so while I'll talk about the more common ones, the same logic applies. The Mark 9 is in a really good spot, being one of the strongest Spitfires for its BR, and is once again able to climb and use energy as a weapon against most of its foes. While some aircraft will still outperform you at very high altitudes, like above 5 kilometers, the Mark 9 has one of the best climb rates at the BR, meaning you'll be able to beat most of those planes to those high altitudes and are able to have that early energy advantage on them. As you're still a Spitfire, you can outturn anything that isn't a Zero or a Repu. Because your weapons are wing-mounted, avoiding head-ons is best practice, and I'd recommend entering dogfights at around 400 km an hour, trying to end them as soon as possible so you stay in a good energy state for the next foe. As this Spitfire is the first to get suspended ordnance, it's finally viable in ground RV as something other than a pure fighter, being able to carry a single centerline 500-pound bomb. The exception to this is the Israeli Mark 9C, which can instead carry two 250-pound bombs and 16 8cm heat rockets. These rockets are very good for CAS, having a very straight trajectory and being great for top-down attacks. We'll talk more about Israeli Spitfires soon when we get to their Mark 9 clipped wing. In 1943, a newer version of the Merlin, the 66, was introduced. This was a significant upgrade over the Merlin 61 and was promptly fitted into the Mark 9, which was known initially as the Mark 9B before being renamed to the Spitfire LF Mark 9, L meaning low altitude. The LF Mark 9 first entered operational service in March 1943 with 611 and 311 Free French squadrons, and was by far the most produced Mark 9 variant with over 4,000 built. In March 1944, the LF Mark 9 was cleared to use 150 octane fuel, providing it another sizable increase in engine performance and further contributing to its brilliant dogfighting performance. The LF Mark 9 was produced with different wing configurations, namely the C-type wing with 4 303s and 2 Hispanos, and the E-type wing with 2 50 cals and 2 Hispanos. In War Thunder, the LF Mark 9 is one of the best aircraft for its BR in the game, sitting at 5.7 and offering you immense performance and a very forgiving playstyle. Much like all the previous Spitfires, the LF Mark 9 excels at dogfighting due to its high maneuverability. It can outturn almost anything it faces and, due to its very powerful engine, you're once again able to outclimb enemies. While some may outperform you at high altitudes, your sheer rate of climb will often ensure you have the energy advantage over them at the start of the match, and thus the ability to dictate the fight. In short, the LF Mark 9 is sort of the perfect Spitfire, being able to excel in the turning playstyle of the earlier Spitfires and the boom and zoom capability of the later ones. While you do have incredible performance, there are a few notable enemies to be mindful of. Most of the Japanese planes you'll be facing, such as Zeros and Repus, will be able to outturn you. This isn't a huge problem, as you can energy fight infinitely better than they can, but it's still something to be mindful of. The Soviet Yak-3U is also something to bear in mind, as it's one of the few planes that, in the hands of a more skilled pilot, can beat you, being able to climb and energy fight much better than you are. Later on in the match, you may also struggle against some real space climbing planes, especially if they use teamwork, such as Ta-152s. As you have wing-mounted guns, you're often at a disadvantage in head-ons against most aircraft, especially against planes that rely on them, such as F-82s. Bombers with capable defensive armament can be threatening, especially if you approach from the wrong angle or sit behind them. Finally, other LF Mark 9s are a common occurrence, with the LF Mark 9 being found in no fewer than 4 different tech trees. There are currently 6 LF Mark 9s in game across 4 tech trees, 2 British, 1 American, 1 Soviet, and 2 Israeli ones. We'll get to Israel later, as theirs are unique, and look first at the others. The first British one has the E-type wing, meaning it is armed with 2 50 cals and 2 Hispanos. It's found in the tech tree at rank 4, folded underneath 2 Griffon Spitfires that we'll cover later in this video. It can carry a single AN M64 500-pound bomb, which is the best that Spitfires can carry, or a smaller 250-pound bomb, or an armor-piercing bomb if you're freaky like that. As this is the only normal tech tree LF Mark 9, it's going to be the one most of you will be experiencing. The second British one has the C-type wing, meaning it is armed with 4 303s and 2 Hispanos. While this means that the E-type wing is more powerful, it's a very subtle difference and can come down to personal choice. This is Plagius's Spitfire LF Mark 9C and is a rank 4 premium. It can carry a single 500-pound bomb, much like the other LF Mark 9. It isn't actively on sale most of the time, rarely popping up for the occasional sale once every year or two. As such, even though it's an amazing plane to fly, I'd only recommend buying it if you really like the LF Mark 9, or you're a collector, as it takes a fair bit of patience to grab. For a bit of history on this one, it was flown by the highest-scoring Southern Rhodesian ace of the Second World War, John Plagius. He scored at least 16 kills, 4 of which were in his LF Mark 9 5JK during 1944. The next LF Mark 9 is the American premium Spitfire LF Mark 9C. This one is a sort of mix of the last two, having the C-type wings of Plagius's, whilst having the good bomb from the Tech Tree LF Mark 9. This one is available year-round for 4,880 Golden Eagles, and can be a good pick for getting to the American air tree if you enjoy flying Spitfires. As for the history behind it, as early as 1941, there were 3 full squadrons of American volunteer fighter pilots in Britain, known as the Eagles. While they originally flew Hurricanes, in August 1941 they retrained on Spitfires. Until late 1942, they operated as British squadrons, until an agreement transferred them over to the 8th Air Force of the USAAF. These were combined to form the 4th Fighter Wing, although they still flew Spitfires in some capacity all the way up until Germany capitulated. Next up is the Soviet Spitfire Mark 9C. Despite its name, this too is an LF Mark 9, being functionally identical to Plagius's, with the C-type wing and the underwhelming GP bomb. This too rarely pops up on sale, occasionally showing up no more than once a year. As such, I'd once again recommend getting this if you're a collector, or you'd like to get into the Soviet tree, but find yourself really enjoying the LF Mark 9. For the history behind this, earlier in the war, Stalin requested and was subsequently sent 143 Spitfire Mark 5Bs. Unfortunately, the shape of these led to other Soviet pilots and AA gunners mistaking them for Bf-109s, and a number were lost to friendly fire. The Mark 5B was withdrawn after only 3 months of service. The Soviet Union was then supplied with around 1,200 Mark 9s, including the LF Mark 9. Soviet pilots liked these, but they weren't well suited to Soviet combat tactics and the rough airfields at the front lines. These were then withdrawn to air defense units, using their high-altitude performance, something that many Soviet fighters lacked, to intercept German bombers and recon aircraft. The Spitfire remained the Soviet Union's main fighter for this role all the way until 1947. For spading the LF Mark 9, of which only the British Tech Tree one needs spading, put focus on upgrading the 20mm cannons, at least to the new standard, and getting the 150 octane fuel as well as other engine upgrades. The final tree in game that flies the LF Mark 9 is Israel, who built their first Spitfires from RAF Rex, scrap, and Egyptian salvage. These numbers were later properly bolstered by help from Czechoslovakia with Operation Velveta, where they flew around 50 Spitfires to Israel, notably the Mark 9 and LF Mark 9. These would prove useful in the 1948 war, especially as escorts to B-17s and Beaufighters in the crucial early stages of the conflict, and were popular among pilots, being a huge upgrade over the Avia S-199 Sakin. One example of this was Ezer Weizmann and his Black Spit. Weizmann, himself a future Prime Minister, and his LF Mark 9E took part in Israel's first fighter mission, strafing a convoy. Later, he and a few others would attack a large group of unarmed British Tempests, killing an RAF pilot. His Black Spit, as it was known, was one of the few not sold to Burma in the 1950s, and instead featured prominently in military parades. In-game, the Israeli tree has one of the better collections of Spitfires, featuring a Tech Tree F Mark 9 called the Spitfire Mark 9C, and a premium LF Mark 9E, Weizmann's, with the E-type wing, and a Tech Tree LF Mark 9 with clipped wings. For the first two, these differ only for the ones found in other trees by their suspended ordnance. All Israeli Spitfires can carry 2 250-pound bombs, and 16 of the Swiss 8cm heat rockets. These rockets synergize really well with the Spitfire's airframe, as they fly very straight and reward direct hits, although you'll have to aim with your wings. The other Spitfire, being an LF Mark 9 with a clipped E-type wing, is unique. In real life, as the Spitfire had detachable wingtips, many Spitfires ended up operating with clipped wings. This was done to improve low-altitude performance, at the cost of worsened high-altitude performance. Smaller wing surfaces allowed for better rolling and higher speeds, as well as better performance at those high speeds. Towards the end of the Second World War, as the Luftwaffe became something of an afterthought, lower altitude fighting became more prevalent, and higher altitude interceptions became rarer. Therefore, more and more Spitfires flew with these clipped wings. In-game, while there are two other clipped-wing Spitfires, which we'll cover soon, the LF Mark 9 CW is easily the best. While the clipped wings do mean it turns worse and climbs worse than the other LF Mark 9s, and is therefore slightly worse than them in my experience, it's nimble and powerful enough for you to really feel that increased roll rate and high-speed maneuverability. The final Merlin-powered Spitfire was the F Mark 16. This was nearly the same as the Mark 9 in most aspects except for the engine. The Merlin 266 was a license-built Merlin 66 made in the USA. All Mark 16s were configured to be low-altitude fighters, and this was reflected in the engine, which had such optimizations. Almost all Mark 16s had clipped wings too, and featured a bubble canopy with a smaller rear fuselage. These were armed with the E-type wing, featuring two 50 cals and two Hispanos, as well as the capacity to carry two 250-pound bombs under the wings. In-game, the F Mark 16 sits at 5.0 and is one of the duller Spitfires to play. Having clipped wings, it loses out in turn and climb rate against the other Merlin-equipped Spitfires. Its engine lies between the F Mark 9 and the LF Mark 9 in performance, with performance tapering off faster at higher altitudes than previous Spitfires. While you can still climb a little, you'll not find yourself at a high enough altitude to do energy fighting well. Instead, you've got a better roll rate and dive speed, allowing you to more easily fly defensively. Some may describe the F Mark 16 as a jack of all trades, but for me personally, it just feels rather mediocre and, frankly, missable. In response to Royal Navy demands for an engine capable of generating good power at low altitudes, Rolls-Royce developed the Griffon engine in 1939. Later that same year, there were already concepts to fit this into the Spitfire, with the first successful flight taking place in November 1941 as the Spitfire Mark IV. This had the C-type wing, a retractable tail wheel, and a mock-up of a 6-cannon armament. This was later renamed to the Mark 20 to avoid confusion with the Recon type, before becoming the Mark 12. The Griffon performed well in tests, and the Mark 12 was the first of its kind to enter service. These were manufactured from Mark 5C airframes and had either Griffon 2 or 4 engines, giving them superb low and medium level performance, declining at higher altitudes, but being one of the fastest aircraft in the world at low altitude, beating out a Typhoon and a Focke-Wulf 190, contrary to expectations. Unfortunately, pilots found it difficult to use their advantage in combat, as German pilots were reluctant to get drawn into dogfights with any Spitfire below 20,000 feet. On the occasions where the Mark 12 was able to engage them, it proved incredibly formidable. As you may have noticed, the first Griffon-powered Spitfires had poor high-altitude performance. This was due to their single-stage supercharged engine. By 1943, a new Griffon, the 65 series, was developed with a 2-stage supercharger and provided a substantial performance increase over the Mark 9. This new aircraft was the F Mark 14. Upon entering service, it was well liked by pilots who really appreciated the high-altitude performance and climb rate, reportedly giving Luftwaffe pilots the shock of their lives when they'd see a Mark 14 climbing up to tackle them head-on. The Mark 14 was also the most prolific Spitfire for shooting down V-1 flying bombs, and was used as the main high-altitude air superiority fighter in Northern Europe by the 2nd Tactical Air Force from December 1944. With that said, it was rather heavy, making it less maneuverable than its Merlin counterparts. Earlier versions featured the C-wing and armament, whilst later versions had the E-wing with its armament, as well as the bubble canopy and the trimmed-down fuselage. This can be seen in-game as the premium Spitfire F Mark 14C and the Tech Tree F Mark 14E respectively. They effectively have the same performance and are both 5.7, so I'll cover them as one. When playing the Mark 14, you'll notice that you don't have the incredible climb rate of the LF Mark 9. That said, it's still a competitive rate and you'll usually be above most enemies. With this altitude advantage, you can choose which fights to pick, so being able to pick them well is key. Your engine gives you great acceleration and you can accelerate well in dives. While you aren't quite as good as turning as the LF Mark 9, you're still a Spitfire and you can still beat most things in a turn. You can also boom and zoom well, as long as you have the energy advantage, and your performance at very high altitudes can exceed that of the LF Mark 9. In ground battles, the Mark 14s only carry a single 500 pound, which doesn't make them ideal. The Mark 14 was later refined to the Mark 18, which was identical in most ways, but with extra fuel and a stronger wing structure. Its handling was nearly identical to the Mark 14, and so it wasn't even put through performance tests. The Mark 18 missed World War II and only saw limited action during the Malayan Emergency against rebels. In-game, the Mark 18 is practically identical to the Mark 14E, except for its ground armament. In addition to the center-mounted 500-pound, it can carry either 3 bombs, a centerline 500-pound and 2 wing-mounted 250 pounds, or 8 RP-3 SAP-HE rockets. This makes it a decent choice for ground RB, as it's the best armed of the British 5.7 Spitfires. If you only want to grind through one 5.7 Griffin, I'd recommend the Mark 18, although I'll always recommend the LF Mark 9 over it. In late 1944, a number of Mark 14Es underwent conversion to have a camera fitted. This proved to be a capable reconnaissance aircraft, and around half of the Mark 14s that were built to the new FR Mark 14 standard. As these were mainly used at low altitudes, all purpose-built FR Mark 14s had clipped wingtips. In-game, there are 2 of these clipped-wing FR Mark 14Es. The first is found as a British Rank 4 premium that often pops up for sale around the anniversary of the Battle of Britain. This one, Prendergast Spitfire FR Mark 14E, is painted to be the Spitfire flown by the Canadian squadron leader James Prendergast, who flew one of the last reconnaissance flights over Normandy before D-Day, as well as shooting down 2 Focke-Wulf 190s less than a week before the war ended. The second is found in the French tree, at rank 4 in the Belgian subtree. This represents the large number of FR Mark 14s flown by Belgium. In-game, both fly the same and are, unfortunately, one of the more underwhelming Spitfires you'll encounter. As the FR Mark 14E has a Griffin engine and clipped wings, it does unfortunately perform almost universally worse than the LF Mark 9s, which are the same BR, 5.7. If you still want to play it regardless, you'll need to try to climb, which the clipped wings hinder, to ensure you have enough energy to work with. Your clipped wings perform better in a dive than the previous Mark 14s, and so if you are able to get an energy advantage over your enemies, you're better suited to diving on them. Because of your clipped wings giving you a better roll rate, you can fly defensively more easily, although be mindful that your engine isn't outstanding at lower altitudes, and you will feel the heavier weight of the airframe. I wouldn't recommend buying the premium one unless you're a collector. In early 1942, it became clear that Spitfires with the new Griffin 61 engine, which was the base engine off of which the Griffin 65 was modified into, would need their airframe and wings strengthened. This led to a new proposed design, the Mark 21. It had redesigned wings that were lighter, stiffer, and fitted with a total of 4 Hispanos without any machine guns. The wings were also larger and slightly differently shaped to previous Spitfires, not quite having the same iconic elliptical shape that they were all known for. When the Mark 21 was trialled in 1944 and early 1945, it received damning condemnation from the Air Fighting Development Unit as it had terrible handling which would have to be ironed out in the next few months. After trials in March, it was finally cleared and deemed a satisfactory improvement. Unfortunately for the Mark 21, it arrived too late in the war to see any meaningful combat, with the only reported engagement being 2 Spitfires strafing and sinking a German midget submarine. The Mark 21 was developed into the Mark 22, which had a trimmed-down rear fuselage with a bubble canopy. As it entered service after the war, it only saw service with 1 main RAF squadron, as well as 12 auxiliaries. In 1955, these were sold on to southern Rhodesia, Egypt, and Syria. The Mark 22 could carry 3 500-pound bombs and/or 6 rockets. The final variant of the Spitfire, the Mark 24, was similar to the Mark 22, but with increased fuel capacity and better fittings for rockets under the wings. All of the Mark 24s had the larger tail from the Spiteful, which we'll talk briefly about soon. Later Mark 24s also had the Hispano Mark 5, which was lighter and overall more reliable than the Mark 2. The last Mark 24 rolled off the production line in early 1948 and left service in 1955 after it was retired from its final posting in Hong Kong. In-game, both the Mark 22 and Mark 24 sit at rank 4 in the British tree, folded together. Both have the same fuel tanks, and so, to differentiate them, the Mark 22 is not given 150 octane fuel, meaning that the Mark 24 has around 200 horsepower more engine power, which you do feel reflected in battles. The other difference is in the armament. Whilst both have the Mark II Hispanos, as the Mark 24 in-game is representative of an early model, the Mark 24 can carry 4 more RP-3 rockets. Despite these differences, both play very similarly, so I'll talk about both as one. As both are 6.7, they're actually comparable to the earlier Griffon Spitfires in terms of flight performance, but at a much higher BR, so I'd recommend a similar playstyle. When dealing with enemies, it's important to approach them according to your advantages over them. If you're pitted against Japanese fighters, and even other Spitfires in down tiers, don't turn with them as you're much heavier than them, and instead use energy to your advantage. Avoid getting stuck in turn fights against Soviet fighters at low altitude. You're an excellent energy fighter, so you can really leverage boom and zoom tactics against your foes. Against heavy bombers, be careful, especially with their rears, as you lack nose-mounted guns. If you have to engage them, try approaching from in front and above. As you're at a high BR, you'll be running into early jets practically every match, especially as many of these are at the same BR as you, if not lower. But there are a few different ways to deal with these. For German and Japanese jets, they tend to perform terribly above 4.5 kilometers, which means you can beat them by energy trapping them after baiting them up. Soviet jets too tend to suffer above 5 kilometers, and often have very low ammunition, meaning they have to be much more careful of their shots. Your biggest issue is going to be American jets, but if you can bait them into turn fighting, you'll usually come out on top. As is the case with other Spitfires, avoid head-ons as your wing-mounted guns aren't amazing for them. While the Admiralty had first expressed interest in the concept of a carrier-borne Spitfire in 1938, it didn't go anywhere, and so the Fleet Air Arm was stuck with woefully outdated Gloster Sea Gladiators at the onset of the Second World War. The Royal Navy had assumed that since Germany and Italy lacked carriers of their own, air combat would be exceedingly rare, which turned out to bite them in the arse as land-based aircraft were able to reach further and further out. The Hawker Hurricane had proven capable of being adapted to carrier operations, and navalizing the Spitfire was back on the cards. After seeing a drawing of a Spitfire with an arrestor hook and folding wings in 1939, a carrier Spitfire was considered again, although the Battle of Britain and the high demand for land-based Spitfires kept their idea on a back burner a while longer. The Grumman F4F Martlet, later called the Wildcat, was bought as an interim measure in 1940, whilst the Sea Hurricane became operational in 1941, and, while it was liked, there was still a strong desire for the performance of the Spitfire. In late 1941, a number of Spitfire Mark V-Bs were converted with arrestor hooks to become the Seafire Mark 1B, and would mark the first of many Seafires to grace the Fleet Air Arm. The main use of the Mark 1B was to get the Royal Navy used to operating Spitfires on carriers. The second Seafire variant was the Mark 2C, which was based off of the Spitfire Mark 5C and included catapult spools to allow it to use catapults. In 1943, RATOG, Rocket-Assisted Takeoff Gear, which consisted of small solid-fuel rocket boosters, finished testing and became a standard fitting for all Seafires. Unfortunately, this isn't seen in-game, at least not yet. The first truly carrier-capable Seafire was the F Mark III. This had many similar features to the Mark IIC, but featured folding wings, allowing many more to be stored below the deck. It also used the more powerful Merlin 55. A sub-variant, the LF Mark III, used the Merlin 55M, which was adapted for better low-altitude performance. Later production Mark IIIs were even equipped with Mark V Hispanos. One export customer of the Mark III was, strangely enough, Ireland, who, despite not having any carriers, purchased and denavalized 12. The LF Mark III was also used by France, seeing action in 1948 against the Viet Minh in the First Indochina War before being withdrawn in 1949. In War Thunder, the Seafire LF Mark III sits at rank 3 in the British tech tree and rank 4 in the French tech tree. Being at 5.0 in Air RB, I'd refer to the LF Mark III as the first Soupfire, because it feels like you're flying a Spitfire that's full of soup. It's effectively just a heavier Spitfire Mark 5C, having that exact same engine power, and as such really struggles at any sort of altitude. It's slower than nearly everything you'll face, and is generally outperformed by most other fighters around it. If you're still inclined to play it for whatever reason, treat it like a turn fighter with a workable climb rate and go for opponents that are either positioned badly or distracted. Avoid going after bombers as you don't climb well enough to intercept and you have rather low ammunition. The only difference with the French Seafire is that it lacks a mount for the single 500-pound bomb on the undercarriage. Following the success of the Seafire Mark III, the Seafire Mark 15, powered by a Griffin 4 engine with a single-stage supercharger, was designed. This was effectively an amalgamation of the Mark III's airframe and wings, a retractable tail wheel, larger elevators, and, of course, the new Griffin engine. This was subsequently modified into the Seafire F Mark 17, with the most important change being a reinforced undercarriage, allowing it to carry a greater bomb load. Most production Mark 17s also featured the cut-back rear fuselage and the bubble canopy. They also featured the Hispano Mark V, an upgrade from the Mark II, which is shorter, lighter, and has a faster rate of fire. In-game, the Seafire F Mark 17 sits at rank 4 in the British tree. At 5.3 in AirRB, it does best at low altitudes, climbing exceptionally well below 2.5 kilometers, but not above, as the engine tapers off very quickly, being woefully inadequate above 3.5 kilometers. If you want to make the Seafire work for you, you'll have to pick and choose which engagements carefully. Heavy bombers will usually be a no-go, as they're usually high up and take far too much of your limited ammo to kill, at least initially. Instead, target enemies that are low, as the Seafire shines in low-altitude dogfights. If you get on the tail of most enemies, you'll be able to stay there. In ground battles, the Seafire can carry 3 bombs instead of 2, 1 500-pound and 2 wing-mounted 250 pounds. Overall, the Seafire F Mark 17 is a workable plane, but doesn't really offer any standout capabilities that other Spitfires around the same BR can offer. The first Seafire to use a Griffin 60 series engine with a 2-stage supercharger was the Seafire F Mark 45. This had been based on the Spitfire F Mark 21 and didn't feature the folding wings from the previous Seafires, as it was intended to be a temporary variant. This was followed by the Seafire F Mark 46, which was a Spitfire F Mark 22 adapted to naval standard, again without the folding wing. In April 1947, the Griffin 60 series were replaced with Griffin 85s and 87s powering 2 contra-rotating propellers. The final version of the Seafire was the FR-47, which had several improvements over the previous variants. It had hydraulically folding wings, contra-rotating propellers, a long supercharger air duct, and, on most production models, the Griffin 88. It also featured the ability to mount up to 2 500-pound bombs or 8 RP-3 rockets under the wings, which were armed with 4 Hispano Mark V cannons. The FR-47 saw action in both the Malayan Emergency and the Korean War, although were withdrawn from frontline service in 1951. During these, Seafires primarily underwent ground attack and combat air patrol missions, with the only notable incident being losing 1 to friendly fire from a B-29 Superfortress before being replaced by the newer Sea Fury. In-game, the Seafire FR-47 is found folded at rank 4. Being 5.7, it's the same BR as the LF Mark 9 and the other Griffin Spitfires, and should be compared to those. The FR-47 is most comfortable at high altitudes, being the best at 6 to 7 kilometers. This, combined with its armament of 4 Hispano Mark Vs, make it well suited for hunting heavy bombers and other high-altitude fighters. Due to your high stall speed, you're not well suited for turning against most of your enemies, so be careful. Despite that, it's significantly heavier than the other Griffin Spitfires, and that's reflected in its lower acceleration and rate of climb. You can get around this by side climbing until you're at the altitude where you perform best. Should you need to, the FR-47 performs well in a dive, and has a good top speed for its BR. Be mindful of your Mark V Hispanos, as though they're an improvement, their faster rate of fire means you'll burn through ammunition faster than you might expect. In ground RB, the Seafire can carry either 2 bombs or up to 8 RP-3 rockets, which make it a decent choice, although somewhat outshone by the F Mark 18E. A video on all of the Spitfires wouldn't be complete without at least a mention of the Spiteful and Seafang, which were essentially the apex versions of the Spitfire and Seafire respectively. The Spiteful started development in 1942 and featured a radical new wing design as well as a larger tail fin. The wing was no longer elliptical, but instead much straighter and can be found on the Supermarine Attacker. Whilst the Spiteful was eventually cancelled as it fell into obsolescence due to the advent of jets, 19 prototypes were built out of the original 150 ordered. The Spiteful would have been armed with 4 Hispano Mark V cannons and powered by a Griffin 69, driving a 5-bladed propeller. The Seafang was essentially a redesigned Spiteful geared towards carrier use. It featured contra-rotating propellers powered by a Griffin 89. Much like the Spiteful, it too was cancelled, with only 18 of the 150 being built. While neither of these are currently in-game, they'd certainly be interesting to see as new superprops. And that's it for Spitfires and their Seafire cousins as they currently stand in War Thunder. From spading every single Spitfire, to writing the script, to recording and editing everything, this video has been my biggest undertaking yet, and if you're still with me, I just wanted to thank you for sticking around until the end. If you've got any feedback or suggestions, leave a comment or let me know in the Discord, link in the description, where there'll be a vote up shortly after this comes out for the next video. If you enjoyed this and want me to continue making more, please consider liking and subscribing, as it really means a lot to me, as I really enjoy making this content, and I hope you've enjoyed watching it. And that's all from me. I've been Girltwink. Fly safe.